All right, we are live, and I think it is probably locally recording us.
Looks like it.
So.
All right, hello YouTube. By the way, we're as organized as ever.
Yeah.
Okay. So, I think I'm as ready as I'm going to be. But
yeah, let's do it. But actually, before we start, I'm getting a lot of noise. I think it's from Michael. It's like desk noise, like
Yeah, I heard a little tapping.
Like
yeah,
I don't know if it's mouse or keyboard noise. The microphone might be
as
low, or
as I said, I have not recorded here. There's a little bit of a damp problem in the ears, and the microphone stand wasn't one of them.
yes, I see. Perhaps that will be a partial theme.
Has a water, has a water feature.
I guess. I guess. Try not to fidget, I guess. At least when you're talking, so that it doesn't end up in your audio.
Yeah.
Yes, good. Yes, I'll try to remember that.
All right.
I will admonish my mouse and keyboard to be quiet.
Yeah. All right, I will start talking, and we'll just see how that goes. It's May 12th, 2024, and welcome to episode 275 of the Retrocomputing Roundtable. The RCR is a podcast about retro computer news, nostalgia, collecting, floods, and 1975, I guess. I'm Paul, near Boston, and I am joined today by three retrocomputing enthusiasts. We have Quinn from rural British Columbia. We have Quinn Dunkey from rural British Columbia. How are you?
Hello, that is my name and my location approximately. I'm doing very well. It's very hot and dry here. We're having a heat wave. So apparently Michael got all the rain that we used to have.
Right. Also joining us for the first time in a while, Michael Mulhern in Sydney. How are you?
Soggy, damp, and for those that don't like the word, moist.
Thanks.
Demonetized.
Right. And also joining us, Blake Patterson from the DC area. How are you?
I'm doing well. The moist is the word around here, or has been for the past 2 months or so, with the flooding of my basement computer room. The moniker for the Byte Seller website I run. We had a failed sump pump, and the carpet got very much with that word. And we had to empty everything. I had to empty everything in this room and do a number of things. And then, so it's actually being set up. I think no hardware was damaged, but it continues to be quite an experience. And as a public service, I'd recommend everyone have their sump pump replaced every 5 to 6 years. I would say, embarrassingly, I do admit, apparently I waited 20 years, which is too long.
Wow.
Pardon?
So that's the list: the batteries, capacitors, and sump pump. Take care of all of these things.
Those are the
just don't get them confused and take out the sump pump.
Right.
And indeed. So yes, I'm busy today. I've busied myself with further resetting up things in the background. For those on the YouTube stream, you can see a partially assembled Amiga 2000. I'm trying to bring that on today, so
Nice.
Get it online by tonight. We'll see. Anyway, all right, that's it for me. Yeah.
Cultural question: Are sump pumps like an Eastern American thing? Like, I've heard of them. I'm sort of aware of what they are, but like houses here don't have them, as far as I know.
Well, yeah, I'll say the where I live in the Northern Virginia, DC area, and many, I guess certainly all of the homes in the region close to where I am have, if there's a basement, there typically is a sump pump. Which, you have your basement, you can have basement leaks, cracks coming in, little water coming in through minor cracks in the wall. It's always through the wall. What can be done is a sort of a trench is dug into the concrete, into the floor, into the foundation.
Right.
Rocks are put in. There's a channel, and it leads to it's a connected channel. It covers the perimeter of the room typically, and it leads to, in one of the corners, a kind of a large bucket in which there's about a 12-inch tall, very hopefully rugged pump. With the floater, and when water drains down through the block wall very slowly, it accumulates, ends up in that bucket, and it kicks on, and that's a very common and fairly reliable. I can't fault the 20-year-old pump that failed on me. I should have replaced it, but it's extremely common here, and I think I've noticed in building single-family homes, especially Northern Virginia, where they're are getting quite large with the economic situation up here. They've opted more and more to build a 3-story house and dispense with the basement to kind of avoid that issue, because water is a big issue around here. So is that
an above basement?
Yeah, I think the difference in basement wall composition is probably the difference. So like we certainly have houses here in wet areas as well, but we do drainage differently. Like we use French drains on the outside of the foundation wall, and the foundation wall is sealed with a rubber membrane, and on the outside, there's various other different ways it's done. But I guess in the eastern U.S. where it's wet, you have a lot of older houses with like block wall foundations and things where they're not really totally watertight. So that makes sense.
I will say, just to add briefly and make it a bizarrely long and unrelated
sorry, I've just ruined this podcast.
Had a very, very moist garage turned into a kind of a workroom. And the way that was done was, indeed, a French drain was put outside. The outside wall was waterproofed as best can be done. And there's a pump. I guess we've been, and then there's at the end of that French drain, just to make sure, and we're calling that a sump pump, but it's outside. So
right, yeah, okay, yeah. Now, folks in the comments are chiming in with various other places where they do sometimes have them, and I think the common thread is probably the age of the house more than the location of the house. I think older houses, they built foundations less watertight than they do nowadays. Is probably why, because I've mostly lived in the West, where the houses are mostly quite new, so they have newer standards for building basement walls. But anyway, that was fascinating for me, at least, because I like this stuff. So sorry for our listeners who just...
It's something I've got to look at. But I'll just put my background in context. The creek behind me is at the back of my property. It's normally not even knee high, and you can jump across it. It's now currently about upper chest high, and I definitely can't jump across about 20 meters. So there's been it has broken its banks, and one of my road accesses is currently underwater. So I've got to leave the area the long way. The causeway is currently under about 1 meter of water.
Yikes.
All right, Paul, what's next on Retro Home Maintenance Roundtable?
Yes.
This week's plumbing hints are from 1975.
Yep. So exactly. So we're doing episode 275, and we've been generally tracking the years with these episodes. And the year that would correspond to is 1975. So we were going to just talk about at least a little bit about some things that happened in 1975. It sort of seems like, as usual, in the last couple of years, it's like not a lot has happened, but it's just about to become like impossible to talk about these things. So I think this might be the last one where there's like not a lot to talk about, and I don't know what we're going to do for 276.
I thought 75 was the year of the Altair on the cover of Radio Electronics magazine. Is that?
Yeah.
Okay.
That is it. So
that's the big one. Okay.
That is the big one. Yeah. So I guess we can talk about that. I'll put the Wikipedia article up. So I guess as I understand the story, the Popular Electronics was going to do a story about the Altair 8800, and they were going to do a cover shoot of the machine, and it got lost somewhere in transit. Like there was one of them, and they sent it there, and it didn't make it. So they actually did have in the January 1975 issue the cover said the Altair 8800, but it was in fact not an 8800. It was some sort of mock-up in order to just have something on the cover, so it doesn't actually look anything like it.
That's amazing. I actually didn't know that factoid.
Yeah, so that's why the cover looks unlike what you think of when you think of an Altair 8800 when you think of an Altair 8800.
Yeah, I guess I just assumed that was like a prototype or something. That's why it looked different. That's funny that it was just actually a fake thing that they put together.
So yeah, I guess from what I understand, so this issue is sought after. Like people will spend a lot to get one of these, and actually it does. I just learned yesterday that the sort of article about it continues in the second issue too. So this is only part one. But.
Is it? I was always under the impression that the magazine actually had schematics so that you could build one in it, because that was what Popular Electronics often had projects in the magazine that you could build. Is that the case or no? Does anyone know?
I know that I do not know. I know you could order the kit.
I'm not aware of the
through them.
8800 being one of their kits, but yeah.
Well, it's like they not necessarily a kit, but like they would publish the schematics of things, similar to what we do nowadays, where like you go on a YouTube channel and they'll have a project and they'll give you the plans, but they'll also sell you a kit if you want to have an easier time of building the thing. Which
sorry, that's what I meant. That in kit form for the list of materials and everything. But I wasn't aware of that. There was similar vintage machines in the Australian magazines, the Super 80 and a few others that were schematic supplied, list of materials. And also then available as a kit for those that didn't want to etch their own PCBs.
Right.
Those were fun days.
So so this issue came out in the January 1975, it was the January 1975 issue, and that also, I mean, I don't know if we want to keep talking about the Altair 8800, but one aspect of this is that Bill Gates and Paul Allen got it, read it, thought it was interesting, thought, hey, we should write a BASIC for this, and immediately turned around and wrote one. So like that was the beginning of Microsoft as well. They I think they established, when did they establish? April or something. I mean, it was sometime really like astoundingly fast after they'd heard of this computer. But they wrote Altair BASIC and released it.
There's
sold it to Altair to MITS, I think.
There's a significant chunk of I'm sure we've all seen Pirates of Silicon Valley, the Apple history, Microsoft history film from some years ago. They do from what I understand, a very, very, I mean, it's of course abbreviated and dramatic, but they show Bill Gates seeing the magazine cover, and then they quickly put together BASIC, and Paul Allen flies down there. It's interesting, and it seems to capture what generally did seem to happen. And they were conveying that indeed it kicked off Microsoft. It seemed like such an opportunity. So and that's I also recommend that movie. It's really good. I think of all the Apple history movies, Silicon Valley history movies, it oddly perhaps is, in my opinion, by far the best. So it's
a long time since I've seen it, but I remember thinking positive thoughts in its direction.
Yeah, I think it was pretty low budget. It was a TV, I can't remember who put it together. It was one of the cable networks, but I think it outshined some of the much larger productions. But anyway, I watch that about every year and a half. I still enjoy it.
Part of the Microsoft lore story is that they, I think if I remember this right, that they showed up, but didn't have a loader.
Yeah.
So they had to write that in the hotel, before the meeting. So they had the tape, but they couldn't get it off the tape onto the demo.
That was, I mean, Bill Gates was sort of known for that in the early days of making deals that he wasn't necessarily sure he was ready for yet. Like they did the same thing with DOS, right? They made a deal with IBM to write this DOS, or actually, I think he actually told them they had it already, and then he
Right.
got them to sign the deal, and then they like very quickly wrote it after they got the deal that had been signed on the premise that they already had it. He did a lot of stuff like that in the days.
Well, I think in fact they bought it, right? I mean, like,
Oh,
they
that's
didn't even
right.
write
That's
it.
right. They didn't even write it.
Yeah,
That's
it's
right.
It's like
Yeah.
QDOS or
Acquired
something
it.
like that.
Yeah, they bought it from some guy who'd. Yeah, that's right.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Oh, I'd hate to be that guy.
Yeah, it
Yeah.
does seem likely that that guy got the short end of the stick.
Yeah. Well,
And
the
I'll
I
wait
guess
for
the
it. Yeah.
I guess the Bill Gates those few business decisions a bit bold were well chosen, I suppose.
Yeah.
It always
Yeah,
kind of
well-
makes it always makes me kind of respect Jack Tramiel more when we talk about these stories because he's sort of the only guy that ever got one over on Bill. He's the only guy that managed to get like BASIC without a license. Which is also why they never updated it in Commodores. And I think MITS was too, right? Like MITS was a one-time deal, and it was, if I remember this correctly, it was from this deal that Bill decided he was never again going to just sell it. He was always going to license things because that's where the money is. But with the one exception being Commodore, which is kind of hilarious, I guess. Tramiel was just a bigger jerk than Bill, and one of them had to give in.
Right.
Yeah.
I think the I pulled this out. This is one of my oldest Microsoft things. This is a Fortran 80
Wow.
for the Apple II in 1980. But so it's got the nice binder and
Yeah.
old Microsoft logo.
Futuristic Microsoft font.
I had the original boxed Microsoft Olympic Decathlon for the Apple II with that font on it, and they spelled it with a capital S as well, like in the literature. It was Microsoft, like two words, which makes me chuckle to this day.
Or a prefix and a suffix without anything in the middle.
Yeah. Yeah, I was always under the impression that Microsoft had written Olympic Decathlon, but I looked it up one day in response to an article that I read about Flight Simulator, because someone had claimed that Flight Simulator was Microsoft's entry into games in like the early 90s, and I was like, ooh, nerd rage, you don't know about Olympic Decathlon. And then I went and looked it up, and actually no, Microsoft just published that, somebody else wrote it. So I begrudgingly had to stow my nerd rage.
That was interestingly one of the first action games or non-text adventures I had on my Apple IIc, which is my first Apple, and I loved that game. I played it a lot.
Yeah, I did too. It was actually a lot of fun.
I remember the intro perfectly with the throws the shot, but yeah.
Yeah, and you had to have paddles to play the shot put, which was weird. It was like the only event that you couldn't play on the keyboard. You had a paddle for each joint on your arm. It was very weird. So
Not
you had to
great with the joystick.
Yeah, you had to like the shoulder. You had to like move the shoulder, and then it would you'd click and it would stop, and then like you had to move the elbow, and then click, and then it would throw. It was very strange.
Yeah, well, and it
I've
actually
never
looked,
played the game,
when you're
but,
not good at it,
that sounds like
you look
something I'd
very
lose
weird.
at.
Yeah. You could.
Yeah, you get all double jointed if you use that joystick. Like, whoops, that's the other way around. Yeah.
Excellent. So yeah, I guess what is that? The Altair and Microsoft, and I guess the other thing that I had on this list is MOS Technology releases the super cheap $25 6502.
Was that 75?
That's what I had written down here. Let's see.
Okay, I thought it was a little later than that. Interesting. Because that means it took Woz quite a while to find it. Because Woz always tells it that the launch of the 6502 at a trade show, probably the West Coast Computer Fair or whatever, was where he got the idea to build the Apple I and II, because they were so cheap and they were giving them away and whatever. But by that number, it was 4 years before Woz learned about the 6502 and then presumably decided to build his thing. So interesting. I guess 3 years, because no, not that long, right? Because the Apple I was 76.
Yeah.
76.
Okay, yeah, no, all right, that lines up. Okay, I'm confusing things.
Yeah, so it looks like it was basically fall 1975. There's some stuff here
Oh,
talking
okay.
about
Yeah.
full page story in July 1975 and the WestCon trade show in September
Yeah.
1975.
Okay. Yeah, that must be the one where the infamous candy jar full of CPUs was. That's what the other thing was always
Where
talks about. They
some
had a
worked.
candy, yeah, a literal candy jar full of them that they were selling for $20 a piece or something. Oh yeah, they mention it there. Yeah.
So yeah, I mean, we'll have plenty of opportunities to talk about things related to the 6502 in the coming years.
Oh yes.
But so yeah, so it seems like 1975 was kind of a setup year. Yeah.
Yeah. Putting
For
all the
the
pieces in
spike.
place for the revolution.
Yeah. Okay, let's see. Anything else anyone wanted to say about 1975?
No. I think that was
I don't think so. Not
sometime
for
back
me.
in primary school, so I only vaguely remember it.
Right.
That was the year I was born. Other than that,
excellent. You and the 6502.
yeah. Well, yeah, I guess so. Yeah.
You youngins.
Yeah. I didn't know I was the exact same age as the 6502. Actually, it's kind of awesome.
Very good.
Right.
We've both
Maybe there
done
was
well
one-
for ourselves.
Maybe there was once a candy ball with a great many little quins in it. You never know.
Yeah, that would explain a lot. I don't know what that means. Just seemed like a joke to make. I don't know.
Yeah.
I don't know what I'm doing here.
Yeah. I think usually you say something like, "Is it?" or "The Quinn
Yeah.
Donkey story" or something.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, this
Really?
would be the go-tos. Need Carrington to fill in these duds for me.
Right.
That's true.
Insert characterism here.
Yeah, exactly.
So
Yeah,
I guess
we need like a Carrington machine that just has like all of his lines on like a keyboard, like a
Right, a little soundboard.
synthesizer. Yeah, and we can just like push Carrington buttons. And, yeah.
I had some fun this morning. I was looking online, unrelated to the show, but they were talking about I guess we're all maybe not everybody. The people in North America are probably aware of the aurora. There's a strange aurora borealis extension, a huge solar storm that took place, and so you can see it as far south as I think it was seen in Tennessee, Alabama, which is almost unheard of. I couldn't tell you if it was visible here because for the past 2 nights it has been some of the heaviest rain we've had, so very cloudy. But in this morning, I guess related discussions, I ran across a lot of people comparing this to the great and horrible Carrington event, and which was stronger in the Carrington event that nothing like that will happen again for many years. But it amused me. The Carrington event had to have been terrible. Though I did not observe.
The most intense geomagnetic storm in recorded history, 1859.
Okay.
So yeah,
Carrington's older
can be
than
excused
we thought.
for not observing it.
He's older than we thought.
Yep. Okay. So I guess we can move on from 1975 to the various items of interest and or news we have. Blake, I have you down here for the first one.
Okay. Let's see. Yes, this one, it's a little obscure, I guess. I'm sharing it kind of because I've been tracking it personally for some time. Right now, as of, I guess, about a month ago, the A1222 Plus, codenamed Tabor, it's a newly available model motherboard, actually, of the, I guess, what people are calling the PowerPC, quote, Amigas. When around the same time Apple switched to PowerPC, the Amiga people, despite the Amiga having been discontinued and Commodore having gone south, started building PowerPC-based accelerators to extend the OS, and now I can't even tell you what the licensing situation is. It's changed so much, but there is something called Amiga OS 4.2 A1222 that is unofficial Amiga OS. And it runs only on several different PowerPC motherboards. This is a unit I've been tracking for, I guess it was announced almost 10 years ago in 2015. And it has it's just basically a circuit board, a motherboard you put in a case, mini ATX case, that has a PowerPC CPU that is perhaps surprisingly less powerful than a G3, but more powerful than some of the other consumer priced boards of this sort. One of the big problems with this is it doesn't have a compatible FPU with any of the prior PowerPCs. It actually uses a Freescale, it's a bizarrely named Freescale QROLQ P1022, which apparently has a something akin to an SPE, one of the Sony PlayStation 3. Its PowerPC the cell has these kind of dedicated processing modules, and it has one of those instead of a standard FPU. And so there's all this back and forth, and there's a lot of discord about whether this is a good thing or a bad thing. I wanted to note that it actually is on sale because some were doubting that it ever would be. When it first was announced, I was very interested in acquiring one, and I kind of readied myself. I actually bought a case. It was actually with Michael's assistance, with some Australian footwork about 9 years ago that I was assisted.
I was going to say that looked familiar.
Yes, I was assisted on acquiring this case that someone who was demoing.
One of the last ones available, planet-wide or something.
Yes, it was, and I think there was a shipping barrier, indeed. But I'm trying to bring up another web image for the people watching the stream. At any rate, this thing is finally available. It took about 10 years to come, and I think there were some part limitations. And again, if kind of looking on I don't know, anyone that sort of spends time on the Amiga forums, especially since it's become available, we'll see a lot of the back and forth. People are kind of passionate on one side or the other of this thing. I was ready to buy one. I had the case and everything, but it's been so long that I personally have sort of lost interest in going down this road. I actually have a bizarre one of these earlier motherboards, which is a weaker, a lesser power PC on a similar board that you put in an ATX case. And so I do have a system that is, a quote PowerPC Amiga that can run the latest Amiga OS, and I do it for fun occasionally. But it's not something that I use weekly or. So yeah, I think the group that put this together, if this had happened earlier, I think I certainly would have bought one. It'll be interesting to see, if anything comes of this. Obviously, it's you're selling a very custom piece of hardware to a very specific crowd, and that crowd itself is very heated as to whether or not this is a good or bad thing. So it's kind of it's I don't expect this to break out and become a new major platform, I'll just say. But anyway, I wanted to mention that it's available, and I don't even actually now I should probably look at the price.
I'm seeing €1,600.
Okay,
for the one in the case, and
in the case,
€1,200 if you just get the motherboard.
Okay, yeah, that was one of the things I remember when it was being discussed. Part of the point of this, as I understood it, and again, I kind of an old school Amiga person. I move loosely in the forum circles. I've been there for decades, but I'm not a person that's right up and to date on the happenings in the latest, the quote current Amiga situation. But I think the thing people were hoping was that this was going to be a little more affordable. There exists system out there. There's something, a dual processor system like the A5000, which is or the X5000. I'm sorry, which is a rather powerful system, but I think it costs much more than this. I think the thought when it first came out, people were throwing around numbers like, oh, it might be, 600 euro or 500 euro. I certainly didn't expect it to be that price. I couldn't purchase this even if I was, fairly excited about it at that price. But anyway, I wanted to mention, I think I discussed this loosely once or twice over the years on the show, and if it did launch. So that was in question, I believe.
How compatible are these things, these modern Amiga things, with original Amigas? That's never been clear to me.
Well, they're completely incompatible with. I mean, they don't have any of the custom hardware of the 68,000 based Amigas.
Okay.
They're not running 60. Their PowerPC. They're not 68,000. Just
right.
like
I get that, but can they run the old Amiga software in some form?
That's what there is a built-in. So just from a hardware perspective, I wanted to get that out of the way. There is there's the standard AUE, the emulators that have been out there for a long time. The Amiga OS 4 has packaged within it, basically emulation layers so that it can run disks. It can boot disk images. It can, desktop applications that play nicely, can render and run. And that's, I think, most of them. So you can run old applications and these PowerPCs. They emulate as far as the CPU and the speed of execution is fine. Is quite quite acceptable. But for instance, one of these, the board that I happened to go, I think I paid like $600 or $700. I guess it was more than 10 years ago, because this is 10 years ago. I guess it was 15, 16 years ago. There was that board. It's a 700 megahertz. It's called a SAM 440 EP Flex board. It is not as powerful as a G3. I believe it's not actually as powerful as a PowerPC 604. So it can run things fine, like the applications that you run on it feel good. But, just an interesting example to note, that particular system, which wasn't the slowest or the fastest, certainly not the fastest, but not the slowest out there, it isn't fast enough to, like some of the games you might try to run, it actually can't run them at full speed. So, you're limited there. This board, I believe it can, but, it's not a perfect fit. I think you feel the fact that you're not on 68,000 hardware, but then again it's a much more advanced, much more extended and evolved operating system. The interface, the libraries, that kind of thing, and people are writing software for it. There are some browsers for it that are not as bad as you would think. You're not gonna. It would be hard, I think. There are those that will argue with me, but I think it would be hard to do your daily driver, but probably easier so than a 68,000 based Amiga, because it's much more CPU power. But yeah, it's there's a whole old school Amiga hardware emulation people, and then there's the quote new Amiga, the PowerPC Amiga, and that whole situation. And not only this, but there are other some also compatible with the original Amiga DOS operating systems that are modern, such as Morphos and AROS, and these are basically in the modern in the PowerPC faster than the original Amiga hardware scene. There are 3 competing operating systems, and people are heavily divided among which they want to run. And arguably, some of the other ones, like Morphos, I believe, does a much better job at running original Amiga software, from what I understand, than the official Amiga OS 4. So it's quite a chaotic scenario, and I've always felt it's a little unfortunate that this tiny group of people are fractured so dramatically, and passionately so. Um, yeah. I'll go ahead and say that, I'm poorly representing, I'm sure, the actual, completely accurate state of things, because I'm not that close in. So I'll probably have a number of people hating on me for sticking my big head in here. But I think I gave a pretty good synopsis. But I just wanted to note for listeners that this board did come out. It's a new, it's the latest, quote Amiga, motherboard, and there's some fun that can be had with it. I would like to have one. I bought the case for it, but I don't think I could pay 1,200 euro, and it was more interesting 10 years ago. Yeah, but I wanted to mention it, so there you go.
Yeah, it definitely
I'm sure
does
we'll
seem
get
like there's
feedback for that.
Yeah, there are just competing aims. Like, I guess maybe
Right.
this might be what people who wish the Amiga had made it, and this is kind of what it would be like now or something. But
Yeah.
otherwise it seems like if it's emulating anyway, and you can get like faster computers that run emulators for the original Amiga stuff. It does feel like this is, I don't know where this fits in that. So.
Yeah, the implementation sounds basically like Rosetta. Every time that Mac had to make an architecture shift, they had Rosetta that would give you an emulation layer so you could run the old stuff while you transitioned and while the developers upgraded the old stuff. But here we've got a situation where the old stuff's never going to get upgraded because it's from 30 years ago, and so now you've just bought this expensive system that's just going to play all the old stuff really slowly, or run new stuff that's not quite good enough to be actual daily driver productivity software. And I know I'm going to get so much hate mail for this, but yeah, I'm not personally seeing the niche where this fits in, but the hardware is really cool looking and really neat, and clearly a lot of effort has gone into it. So a lot of respect to the communities that have built these things. But yeah, I guess it's a subculture that I am not in, but more power to them if they enjoy it.
I can make it more complex and put
You don't need to. It's okay. We get it.
No, it's interesting that you said, and the other tech is 30 years old. It's not like that's going to get upgraded. Well, it has been. The Amiga OS version 2 point whatever was current, 2.04. I'm thinking about too many versions. The latest of the 68,000 operating system, the Kickstart ROM, has been extended, and so now there's further development on taking what was done, back in the 80s and early 90s with that 68,000 hardware. There are new ROMs that you can put in the Amiga that I believe are official from the license holder, and so that 30-year-old piece that isn't PowerPC related is now also being extended. And so
sure.
I
understand. Yeah. What I meant though was that the point of Rosetta,
fairly recent.
The point of Rosetta is to buy you time for the application developers to recompile their stuff. Which, I mean, if you want an Amiga to play Bitmap Brothers games, those are never going to get updated for Amiga OS 4 or whatever. So that would probably not be the target audience for a machine like this. If you just want to play the old games, you should probably just get an old Amiga or emulate it on a modern system. But
right. One last clarification I'll make is that indeed though, the in the context of the you have a PowerPC system here, and you're running the latest PowerPC based Amiga OS 4.2. It does have its own native APIs, and it's a known development target. So one can sit down with C or whatever development tools, write a native PowerPC app that uses the most recent GUI interface elements, the most recent APIs, and release it as an Amiga OS 4 app. And it's not relying at all on any emulation. So that is possible, and that is happening with the apps that are targeting specifically these new PowerPC systems. So. And those are quite snappy, and the interface elements are nice. It actually looks good and it's snappy, but again, it is sort of a kind of a restricted pool as far as the reach of what the developer where they're going to see their app running.
Right.
Yeah. Anyway.
Sold to all 29 people.
But, no, you can't send the case back.
It's still a nice case. I think I was thinking about that.
It is
I
a very
definitely
nice
will use
case.
it. I'll use it for something. I got it over there. It's been sitting there for 10 years. But anyway, yeah. So anyway, that's my news item.
All right. And next, I guess, is Michael. I know something about this as well.
So this one is just basically some announcements which Paul's probably very aware of that have just come through the Apple II Facebook group. So as many people are aware now that Kansas Fest is open for business for registrations, and the theme is my favorite PC, the Apple IIc. So, which is unfortunate that I can't actually attend in person this year. I was planning to, but things have come up to stop that. But what I liked was the two featured speakers that we've got. Rob Gemmell and Rich Williams are going to be there. I gather Rich is going to be in person and Rob is going to be a virtual link, if I remember correctly. But two guys instrumental in the 2C side of things. And for other early Applers, Rich Williams has a very deep run. Basically, project lead for DOS Toolkit, author of FID, author of Muffin, worked with MouseText 65 CO2, and other lovely bits and pieces of the Apple II platform. So if you wanted to go to Kansas Fest, this is a very good year to go, speaker wise, and also for the theme. As I said, I'm a big Apple IIc fan, and it's very sad from my point of view that I can't make it this year.
Yeah, it's too bad. Yeah, it's the 40th anniversary of the launch of the Apple IIc.
Yeah, the unfortunately the launch, which gets overshadowed by that other Apple product that it's never going to catch on. They keep upgrading it every year. The software, they keep upgrading it all the time, and yet the Apple IIc only have one upgrade to the 2C Plus, and that Mac thing. Every year they seem to be popping something out, trying to catch up with the Apple IIc and everything that it can do. And I don't know. Apple's fighting a losing battle with that Macintosh platform.
Yep.
You might be right.
Yeah.
Yeah, no, I have to say that I was not aware of Rich Williams's name. Just somehow it was like stuff that I had. He participated in things that I hadn't dug deeply enough into, but it's amazing. I mean, I'm just. It sounds ridiculous, but it seems kind of like I'm starstruck to meet the guy who wrote FID.
Yeah, but
it's not that exciting
as
of a
you
program,
can see
really.
there on there, he's Apple employee from '79 through to '09. It's really you're going to have someone turning up who basically was at Apple through all the generations of software and hardware, except maybe so he won't be involved in the M platform, but all that is just a fast version of what he would have been working on if you look at it that way. But to have been across all of those architectures and to have been so deeply into the software from the Apple II platform's perspective from the 80s, it's if there was an Apple employee that you wanted to meet apart from Woz, Rich is the man.
Paul, maybe for non-Apple users, do you want to explain what FID is?
Oh yeah. No, yeah. I mean, it's that seems fair. It's basically just the program on the System Master, like the DOS 3 System Master that you use to copy files around, and I think you could format disks with it. Manipulates catalogs and files and moves things around. It was the lore of this is that it was originally called Fishhead, Like he wrote this, and I forget what it stood for. It stood for something, that file something, handler, but he called it Fishhead, and that was shot down at the executive level. Like they said, we can't make our file utility called Fishhead. So it was renamed to FID, which is allegedly Fishhead is dead. They call it something like they officially call it something like file developer, but yeah, I think that's a back formation.
And it's notable for Apple II users because if you were an Apple II user at the time, you used FID a lot. Like you spent a lot of your time in that program. So yeah, that's hence the starstruckness, I guess, for us.
Yeah, you look at it, such a small program and what it did, but yes, you were right. We basically lived in it. You didn't do much without it on a development side of things.
Right.
Yeah, and even as a casual user, just like moving files around and like copying stuff from one disk to another, and just you needed it for everything.
Yeah. I know. Well, there was one time where I'd taken my Apple IIc into the office and I was just setting things up, and I just swung around from the terminal sessions I'd been using for AIX server that I was working with, and promptly tried to copy some files with this on there, just using your standard CP, and for some reason it didn't work, and I thought, sorry, time to reboot with the system master and get FID going.
Right. Yeah. So I think that, that was a very early contribution, but he also worked with the Apple III and the Twiggy drives, and the Newton. He was like software lead on some of the early Newton message pads, and he wrote the digitizer firmware. So he's
Wow.
deep in this stuff.
Yeah, it's interesting. If you look at his career trajectory, it follows the trajectory that a lot of early programmers did, because you started, of course, with like 6502 or Z80 assembly, but then as the systems got bigger and high-level languages became the norm, a lot of people like him stayed low level because that was what they enjoyed and that's where their expertise was. So he kind of drifts downward into drivers and then firmware and then microcode. Like that's kind of what a lot of folks did, is if you want to stay in 8-bit assembly kind of world, that's what you have to do in modern, as computers advanced. You just had to keep sliding down the stack to stay in that sweet spot zone of 8-bit assembly.
Right.
Yeah, that should make for some fascinating talks.
Yeah. And not to downplay Rob Jamel either. He is like he's the 2C guy. I think he was like the project manager or something, but he designed it. So like they look the way they do. Yeah.
You mean the way they look as the most perfect Apple computer ever made? Yeah, you're right.
Yeah. So he's got a bunch of like memorabilia and stuff like that he'll share. So
nice.
Anyway, yeah, interesting. Oh, and the other thing too, which I don't know if this was mentioned, but it's also in Springfield, Illinois. Yeah. So if you find yourself in Kansas City in mid-July, then you may be in the wrong state.
Turn? Yeah, I think we joked about this last time, that Kansas Fest is now even less in Kansas.
Yep. Exactly.
It's not even next door anymore.
Yeah, it used to at least be in the city, but now not even that.
Yeah. So I am on the committee, so I'm sort of we're working on lots of stuff in there, trying to make this make sense. So
I'm sure it'll all come together. As I said, I'm just sort of still grinding the teeth about not being able to attend this year after I was making plans to, and then I hear it's going to be 2C, and yay, this is going to be great, and then suddenly other commitments have pulled the rug out from underneath me, but there's always next year.
Well, and I guess I should probably say too that the week, so Kansas Fest is over most of a week, and then a week after it ends, there's a shorter virtual event that will replay the presentations and have unique presentations to the virtual event as well. So that allows you to see things you missed
Oh, yeah,
if you were
yeah.
actually there, or participate if you can't get there. So
Yeah, yeah.
And
Just
what
won't be
was
there
that
for
again, Paul?
the inaugural one. That's all. So at the new
Yeah.
venue. So
yeah,
Did you say it's happening a week later?
yeah. It's so in person. I'm echoing somewhere.
Yeah, I'm hearing
yeah,
an echo.
that's me. My something has just gone astray here. Okay, drop me out while I fix this up, please.
Let's see if I can do that.
Yeah.
Mute. Okay, I think I have muted. Oh, well, Michael has disappeared entirely. Yeah, so the Kansas Fest in person is July 16th through 21st, and then the virtual event is the 27th and 28th. So that's, I think, a Saturday and a Sunday.
Mm. Boy, this as Michael was saying, this I've not been in person yet. This Apple IIc situation is more appealing, I think, than any of the other headlining that I've seen since I started paying attention to it. I was a
So
huge
the Apple
IIc
the
guy.
Apple III didn't pull you in last year.
It almost pulled me in. It dropped me 4 inches, that's for sure.
Yeah, right.
But yeah.
Okay, let's see. So I guess the next thing is my thing. This is not super new as we're recording, but we hadn't recorded since this happened. But it caused a bit of discussion. Zilog announced that they are stopping the production of the Z80, the Z80. So there's a last time to buy set of June 14th, 2024, at which point they will stop making them. So this caused much consternation because it's a very useful and well used platform. I think so. I'm nearing the end of my expertise on this, but from what I understand, it's no longer going to be possible to buy the 40-pin DIP type Z80 after that. And
I'm going to have to drop out. Half the house has lost power, so it looks like someone's got a tree through the power line somewhere. I've lost a phase on the house, so it could basically the rest could go at any time. So sorry that
Michael.
my return is somewhat short. I'm going to go and get the generator ready because invariably I think I'm about to lose all the power to the house. Okay, see you.
Good luck.
Bye, everybody.
Good luck.
Good luck. All right. Yeah. Right. Yeah. So I think I was saying that it'll no longer be possible to buy this form factor, the 40-pin DIP Z80, and I think a couple of others. I think there is some form of chip that will live on, but anyway, Glenn, you probably know more.
Yeah, I read a little bit into this. So yeah, as you said, they're killing the standalone CPU in the DIP package and probably the couple of the Surface Map packages as well. But it's kind of it got a lot of press, but it's kind of more of a I didn't know they were still making those story than it is an oh my gosh they're killing it story. It's like the 6502 still exists, but they haven't made the actual dips that you can buy standalone for decades or for a very long time. What Western Design Center now sells is you can buy cores, you can buy for your FPGA, you can buy microcontrollers that are based on a 6502 core, so you can buy 6502 cousins and found based things, but the actual 40-pin dips have been gone for a long time as well. So the fact that they were still making this Z80 40-pin dip is sort of amazing. The ones that are going to live on, the Z180, which is like the 65816 to the Z80, if you will, is still being made. And of course, they'll still sell you a core for your FPGA, which is how most things would be using it anyway. Like if you want to build a controller for a washing machine or something, that kind of application, a Z80 is still a good choice for that. But you wouldn't use a standalone chip CPU for that, you would use it as part of an embedded microcontroller or system on chip or ASIC or FPGA, all of which Zilog will still sell you the core for that. So yeah, it's not really going away. It's just like the one package that nobody was buying anyway is going away.
I feel like you would be the one to answer this amongst us, Quinn, but just like with the 6502, the Z80 here with the SoCs, the cousins, how some of the more simplistic ones, some of the ones that are more, where the core is more exposed, so to speak, how hard would it be to adapt that to work as if it were a standalone unit? Have you seen situations where there's interfaces that do that, or would it just be you know what I mean?
Yeah, if you wanted to do that, probably the easiest way is an FPGA, where you can certainly configure an FPGA to act as a standalone Z80 or 6502. Absolutely. It's a bit like, I mean, you would be using so little of the FPGA to do that. It's a bit like when we build retro computers, we put a 1 megabyte RAM chip in them because that's the smallest one you can buy, and then use the bottom 64K of it. It'd be like that. But yeah, you can certainly do that.
Okay.
Yeah.
It was
typically, what you do with an FPGA for something like an embedded application is you have a whole bunch of control circuitry for an industrial factory production line or something, and inside there is a 6502 running it. So the software is written in 6502 assembly to run that box conveyor belt or whatever, and then the rest of the FPGA is used for the control circuitry that's needed for that device. So you can just not do all of that stuff and just have the 6502 in there, and then just connect all the pins to the FPGA's pins, and then build an adapter and stick it in your 65 and stick it in your Apple II, and it would work. But yeah, it'd be a lot of effort I'm not sure why anyone would ever do that, because you can still buy 6502s on eBay and stuff. There's lots of them around. I mean, they made tens of millions of them, so there's plenty of them around if you want to buy one. Like when I made my homebrew machine, I had no trouble buying 6502s. I've got 5 of them in a drawer.
Sure. Yeah, it's interesting. I got a taste of that or I guess as far as the SoCs versus standalones for Motorola, 68000s and the like. The person behind individual computers, as I recall, I think Jen Schoenfeld. At any rate, he was working on something and was looking for some kind of a pre-existing SoCs that had a 68,000 core to use it only for the 68,000 because of some limitation that he'd run into in acquiring whatever devices. And he did a search and found there's a number of devices, and one of them was this SCSI card. And in one of the web searches he did for it was a picture of the scene behind me, which is my wall of computers, and I have some interface cards decoratively hung above my head. One of them was that SCSI card, and he saw the card and sent me a zoomed in picture and circled this chip and said, "Would you mind reading the very precise numbers on the 68,000 base system here? I'm trying to possibly source it to see if I can get some inexpensive pools of these things and just to use the core." And we went back and forth. It did not actually work out for him, but yeah, that was interesting. That's what he was trying to do. So
yeah, if someone's trying to make a product, that's a very different conversation, because while yes, you can easily burn a 68,000 core onto an FPGA and use it, it would be expensive. FPGAs are not cheap. So, I mean, they're cheap for a hobbyist if you just need one. But if you're trying to make 10,000 of a product, your unit cost on them is probably going to be $20 or something like that, which is pretty high for a unit price on any component for a product that you're trying to manufacture. So that's a very different conversation. What you would end up doing probably in that case is using a modern microcontroller, like something ARM-based, and just emulating the 68,000. Like that would be way easier than trying to find some kind of core or system on chip application, or trying to get like epoxy dies or something of a 68,000. Like it's just way easier to emulate it.
Yeah, I think the gens and individual is basically, modern retro enhancement products, flicker fixers,
Yeah.
the cat weasel drive adapters, that kind of thing. So I wouldn't get too too carried away as far as the scope of sales for what he was
Yeah.
going for.
Yeah.
But yeah, I got you. So
Yeah, if you just need 20 of them,
right.
then yeah, maybe like finding them on old SCSI controllers is a viable
Mhm.
approach. Yeah, I can see that. Yeah, like people did that with the SIDS for a while. People were making 8-bit synthesizers that sold in small unit counts, like 100 or so, to niche, electronic musicians. And yeah, they were just harvesting them out of C64s, unfortunately for the hobby. But yeah, that's where they were getting them. So there was a period there in the 2000s on eBay where there was a whole lot of Commodore 64s for sale with no SIDs in them, which was pretty frustrating.
That's rough.
Anyway.
All right. So let's see. I guess the next thing is Quinn's.
So we've been joking lately about how every time we do this show now, I learn about some new computer that I'd never heard of, and it is that portion of the show. This came across one of my mainstream feeds, actually non-computer feeds in my RSS reader, which is always interesting when that happens. There was this story made the rounds. I'll share it for the stream here. So this is the Sega AI, which is a very niche computer that I had never heard of that existed very briefly in 1986. And it's so niche, it's extremely rare. There's something like less than 10 of these things known to exist. It was on the market for a very brief time, and it's shockingly powerful, which is kind of how it caught my eye. I mean, obviously, something that came out around that time that we've never heard of is always going to catch my eye. But then you look at the specs on this thing. It's got a 16-bit NEC V20 CPU, which I actually had to look up. So the NEC V20 is a 16-bit CPU that is pin compatible and object code compatible with the 8088. So it could, in principle, run XT software, which is kind of amazing. And it's, in principle, a drop-in replacement for the Intel chip. Now, that doesn't mean you can run XT software on the Sega AI computer, of course, because it doesn't have the BIOS and the architecture of a PC. But so it has this 16-bit CPU in it. So impressive CPU. It's got 128K of ROM. It's got a speech synthesizer. The video chip is very impressive. It's the Yamaha V9938, which is the sequel to the 9918A, that chip that's in the TI-99s, and it's in the ColecoVision, and it's in a bunch of arcade machines. So that was already a very good video chip. And this Yamaha sequel to that chip is extremely powerful and showed up in very few places. I think maybe the MSX2 had that chip as well. I'm not sure. But it's also got multiple sound chips in it for both synthesis and FM music. And various other things. Amusingly, the media for it is cassette only. So that was a strangely backward thing to do in 1986. But as far as I can tell, this thing never made it out of Japan. So there was a handful of them were sold in Japan, and then it vanished. And the name is interesting. So it's called the Sega AI computer. The AI comes from, it had some sort of built-in Prolog interpreter. And from what I've read about it, that thing was not accessible to applications. So if you were writing a game or an app for this thing, you couldn't access that. So it's not really clear what this built-in Prolog interpreter was for. But for anyone who doesn't know, Prolog was an early artificial intelligence targeted language, kind of like Lisp. It was supposed to make AI type applications easier. So this thing has it's software. It's not a hardware acceleration of Prolog, but it has this built-in Prolog interpreter, and it's not exactly clear what it's for. So what this system ended up doing, it was kind of targeted at schools. So it had a very brief life as an edutainment kind of machine, kind of like the Apple IIs did in North America, where they were hoping schools would all have these things. There was a lot of like math blasters and Reader Rabbit type applications made for this thing. but it had some very cool peripherals. Like it had a touchpad and a built-in cassette drive. It had a jog wheel on the side of it. Like, you got to see the pictures of this thing, which we'll link to in the show notes, because it's a very strange looking thing. It's out of time, this thing. It looks like someone reached forward into some early Apple product line and pulled this thing back and put a cassette drive on it. It's very strange. But there's also some screenshots in this link that I'm going to have in the show notes of some of the software, so you can see how impressive the graphics actually are. That Yamaha V9938 chip is very impressive. But there was only I think less than 6 applications or maybe 10 written for this thing. Yeah, they have screenshots here of literally every piece of software that was written for it, which is less than a dozen, I think, and basically all educational and all in Japanese. But it's again, this is 1986 is pretty early for something as seemingly technically impressive as this machine is, when you consider that it would have been out at the same time as, something like the Apple II GS or the black and white Macs, which were certainly less powerful than this thing appears to be. It's a strange thing, and I'm giving it as a news item because there's been some recent updates to it. So the story kind of started in January of this year. Basically, this guy found one who wrote this. So the page I'm going to share in the show notes is a massive write-up on this machine and everything that's currently known about it. You know how every so often you find a web page that's like some very specific nerdy deep dive on one very specific thing? Well, that's this page about the Sega AI computer. So this guy has made himself the world expert on this machine that nobody seems to know anything about it. So he found one and then went deep on it. And it is emulated in MAME, because of course it is. I don't know how MAME managed to get one to emulate, but they did. And then he's had a couple of updates since. So the most recent update is in I think March or May of this year, depending how you read that date. That he found a couple of the remaining applications for it. So he's trying to accumulate all of the software for it as well. But yeah, really interesting machine, and one that I'd certainly never heard of. And it's every so often there's a computer that looks like it's from a parallel universe, like some alternate 80s computer revolution that happened on another planet. And this is one of those machines. That's why I'm fascinated by this thing. So that's it.
That's really cool.
The Sega AI computer.
Yeah, I'd never heard of it. That's an amazing looking thing. Yeah.
Yeah, it's a strange beast. I mean, the screenshot I've got on the stream right now, where you can see the keyboard, it's got a regular mechanical keyboard, but then there's this whole great big touchpad in the center of the machine as well, that maybe has overlays, because there's other pictures of it that don't have all of the graphics on the touchpad. So I think it has like in television style overlays. Must be. Yeah, and for different educational applications, presumably. And the hardware, the architecture of it is, from what this guy has dug into, the architecture is very much a combination of the Sega Master System and the Genesis. So it has a very console-like architecture in it, and as you would expect to come from Sega. But just the fact that Sega made a computer in the first place was news to me. And then the fact that this thing existed at all and that it had a bunch of software is super interesting. I mean, there were, as we know, there were other console companies that were trying to break into computing. Of course, we have the Atom and some of those attempts, but there were the Intellivision also had a brief attempt to make a computer. They had a basic and a keyboard attachment that you could buy for your Intellivision that would sort of turn it into the world's worst computer. But this thing was a ground-up effort to build a computer by a console company. They were not trying to create cheesy add-ons that no one was going to buy. This was a dedicated effort, and specifically targeting educational software, which was also interesting. So very interesting project. I don't know how it came to exist, and it went away very fast. And it's got to be one of the rarest computers out there, I think.
Yeah, that's fascinating. And I hear you about that graphics chip. Yeah, I think that one I followed with some degree of closeness. There was we may have discussed an aftermarket upgrade. Well, it's like a replacement system for the TI 9948, the Geneve 9640, which basically took over the peripheral box and became the TI. It had one of those 512 color palette, higher resolution. I think it even supported interlace. And I believe you're right. I think MSX2 had it, but I don't know how heavily it was utilized. Those screenshots on this page are quite colorful.
Yeah.
It looks impressive. So yeah,
Yeah,
that was nice chip.
yeah, the graphics on this thing are great. It's really really nice for 1986 especially. I don't. I think all the specs and stuff are in here for it. I don't have them at the top of my head, but and it had really great music, and it had built-in speech synthesis as well. Like, yeah, this thing had a lot of hardware in it, a lot of very specialized hardware. Which again, it must. I mean, maybe that's what killed it. It must have been expensive for all of that hardware. I mean, it had 512K of ROM in it, and the speech synthesizer, and 128K of RAM, and a 16-bit CPU, and and this Prologue thing, and then all the custom hardware, the jog wheel and the touchpad. I mean, all of that is expensive. All of that's going to add to the unit cost of this machine. And so if I had to guess about what killed it, surely cost. I mean, if you think like an Apple II Plus, in 1982 was something like $3,500. In 86, this thing must have been like $5 or $6 grand. Like, it must have been crazy expensive, which might be what doomed it, but who knows? So,
well, it had Prologue. That's
yeah,
the most bizarre thing.
that just came so far out of left field. Yeah, I don't know. Some middle manager decided to put Prologue in this thing, and you're like, what? It's not at all clear what it's there for, but that's where it gets the AI in Sega AI computer from. I guess they were looking for something to distinguish it, I guess, in the marketplace, maybe. Yeah, they needed a hook. Yeah.
I guess
well, Prologue's a little bit related to Logo too, right? I mean, aren't Logo and Lisp and Prologue all sort of related?
I think so. I mean, all of those, they're all academic languages, at least, which are all sort of related. Logo, I think, is more directly related to, is it TCL? I forget.
There was something called Scheme too, I think.
Yeah, that might be what I'm thinking of. Anyway, yeah, there's a complicated family tree of those academic languages for sure. But and I mean, Prologue. I mean, I'm throwing shade for fun, but Prologue was a serious language earlier. Sure. Like 86 is kind of late for it, I think. But in the 70s, Prologue was a pretty serious AI research language. But to have it in a consumer product in 86 is pretty wild. That's kind of out of left field.
From Sega.
Yeah, from Sega. Yeah. There must have been someone on the development team who was like a academic computer scientist, and he liked it or something. Who knows?
There is one thing that so Rembrandt in our comments pointed out one aspect of this, which is pretty amusing. If you look at the keyboard, it's connected by a wire, because it's as it would be, but they've decided to put the wire coming out the front.
Right. Yeah, that's right. That is very strange.
So Rembrandt had said, if you told me this had been AI generated, I believe it.
Yeah, because that's the kind of thing that an AI would get wrong. Yeah. I think the reason for that is because the keyboard will sit on top of the touchpad and just kind of cover it. In which case it makes some amount of sense to have the cable coming out the front, because when you have it sitting on top, then you've got a little loop. I don't know. That's my guess as to why they did that. But yeah, that is strange.
It is.
Yeah, this thing has all the hallmarks of an engineering skunkworks project. Like when someone at Sega was like, we need a next generation crazy, shoot for the stars kind of thing. So let's take 20 engineers and lock them in a room. And when you don't sufficiently supervise your engineers, you get things like this, where they just threw in every crazy idea, and you end up with something that costs $1 million and is useless, but is technically fascinating.
Yeah. The best kind of fascinating.
Yeah, exactly.
Good find.
Yeah. All right. Let's see. Are there more things? Oh yeah. Let's see. Actually, there was one more thing that I thought would be probably a good thing to mention, since it does come up, or it has come up, is that BASIC turned 60. So I think that is it might have been, I'm not sure what the actual date is supposed to be. Yeah, May 1st, 1964 was when the first program was run, or at Dartmouth or whatever. So this, people have been talking about this a bit in recent memory, because we're recording on May 12th. Who knows when you'll hear it on the feed, but So yeah, we'll link to an article by Benj Edwards that sort of goes over some of this, but there's plenty of sort of documentation on this, and we probably don't need to go through the story. I think we did actually. I feel like maybe it was like 5 years ago or something, but there was a basic milestone that we did talk through sometime.
We did, yeah. Yeah, we covered it pretty heavily on the show fairly recently.
Yeah.
And
But
I know
anyway.
we covered I mean, not relatedly, but same, I guess, ballpark of things. I think it was Pascal that turned 40 a few shows ago. I think we talked about that as well.
Yeah.
So
Yeah, I think we went deep on BASIC in episode 264 because that was the 64-year show. So I
That
think
might have made sense.
actually, I think it was Turbo Pascal turned 40, but Pascal later turned 50. It was a different decade jump. Sorry, but yes, it also hit a round number.
Yeah. Okay, so I guess we can leave that there and turn to a word from our sponsor. Okay. Who knows who the sponsor will be? But, all right. And we're back. So the host retrocomputing gift idea for this time is a 40-pin dip Zilog Z80. So time is limited if you want to get
them
this
while you
for
can.
your
Yeah.
retrocomputing enthusiast friends.
that's awesome. So for those not on the stream, the link on the screen here is a link to it on Mouser. So you can still go right now and buy it, but it's been marked end of life. So whatever stock they have, of course, they're going to sell, and that'll be it. But you can still currently buy it in units of one for $9.72, which is pretty awesome. Or if you want 1,000 of them, you can get them for $5.52.
Yep.
Indeed, the notifications right here says on their website scheduled for obsolescence. So yes,
Very, very elegantly phrased.
Yeah.
Indeed.
Oh, and Mouser has 1,171 still in stock. So if you want the remaining Z80 inventory, this would be a good place to start, probably.
If you want to be really mean, you could just buy that lot of 1,000.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. You could be the Sun remarketing of 40-pin Zylogs.
Yeah. All right. Well, so when you are done buying out Mouser's Z80 inventory, we can turn our attention to eBay. And Blake, I think you have the first of these auctions. Though I think you actually posted this like some weeks ago, but it's still there.
Actually, I need to get myself. I seem to have dropped off on my tabs here. If you give me a moment, I can do that. Or actually, sure, if you could do that for me.
Let's do that.
Yeah.
Okay.
Let's do that. Okay. Yes, I was just. It kind of fits into a conversation we were. Something Quinn was saying a little bit earlier. I noticed there is I believe this is. Well, it's new to me. I think it's fairly new to the scene. It's an item. The listing is for the back SID 6581, 8580, Commodore 64, C64, 128 SID chip repair better and. I'm not going to read the rest of this thing. It's an ARM SID. It's basically a. Sorry, that's a ridiculous title. It's a SID, emulated SID. Basically, it's a microcontroller that is emulating. It looks like both the old and new SID, the 6581 and the 8580. So if you have one of the Commodore 64s that was stripped of its SID for music synthesizer use, you could theoretically add this and be back in business. Apparently, there are a number of such devices I've noticed out there. The ad listing here is from the manufacturer of this device, and they list a couple of perks it has over competitors. I don't have a particular fondness or connection to this one in particular, but it's nice to see inexpensive microcontroller based things that are kind of the heart and soul of some of the retro machines out there. The SID chip and the Commodore 64 being one of them. It's nice to see that replacements are there that are modern, can be continued, and keep getting, I guess, more accurate as far as the for, in this case, the punchy sound and all of the little traits and quirks are apparently better represented than ever. So it's $29.99 each, $30 for this replacement unit, and it looks like they're selling. They've got 10 available at the moment. But again, this is the creator. Yeah, just to mention this as a an example of another piece of modern tech kind of filling a gap, so or filling a socket. Yeah, so there you go.
I think it's neat. Like, so if for anyone who hasn't seen it, it's a little PCB with the same pin out, like the same pin footprint as a real SID, but sitting in the middle of it is just a tiny little ARM microcontroller. That's pretty cool. And I guess for anyone who doesn't know, the SID is notoriously difficult to recreate. Hence, it requiring an entire modern ARM microcontroller to even make an attempt at it. It had analog components on the die, so any emulation of it is always going to be an approximation, and different approximations of it are better or worse. And in fact, people say that the SIDs were all a little bit different as well, because there was small differences in manufacturing that made the analog components of the die sound different. But yeah, I'm sure something like this is more than sufficient for anyone who's not super deep into Commodore stuff. I'm sure it sounds just fine.
I think the challenge here has to be, I think as the years went on, people learned like this little glitchy quirk of the SID combined with this little glitchy quirk. If you do this, if you hit these two glitches in the same way, it actually will produce this new sound. And so that's something that, you can, with some reliability, do with the actual chips. And I guess the people behind these are probably looking for, okay, these two things happening, let's try to emulate that as well. I always wanted a SID, like I understand, it has some analog components and it has a very distinct sound. I always wanted, I think there at one point it existed in some form for a PC. I wanted it for the Mac, like an external box, a USB box with an actual SID chip and an audio output, so that I could, play SID tracks, legit, like realistically through my, on the Mac or something. What I learned in digging in the forums, why is this not happening? Is apparently the 6502 it was such a synchronicity between the SID and the 6502 or the 6510 as far as how they how it drives the SID. It's more than just, and I didn't get a full understanding of the details here, but it's more than just, okay, here's a general computer, we'll feed it the data. It's almost as if there's a deeper connection. I don't know. From what I understand, it's almost that you need a 6502 to make it, happen. And it could be that the microcontroller is actually, that's in the scope of what's being emulated here, is the processing setup as well. So yeah, it's a really crazy, but obviously very nice sounding piece of hardware. So anyway, that caught my interest.
Yeah, interesting. I mean, that's what I think of when I think of SID chip is unemulatable. But
yeah, apparently it is. I mean, that's what they used to say, and now we're getting close, I guess. But it's a hard thing.
Yeah, it'll always be an approximation unless somebody finds the original Ruby lith for the original die and produces new ones with those analog elements on the die. It's always going to be an approximation. But I mean, we can almost certainly today get it emulated to a point where nobody could tell the difference in a blind listening test. People will claim they can tell, but if you blinded them, I bet they couldn't. Or
well, they'd be worrying about what you just done to them so severely that they'd say, "Yes, it sounds the same."
Yes.
I promise you.
Blinding in the scientific sense, not in the
not in
the mob sense. Yeah.
For the love of God.
Yeah.
So that's a SID, and that's Coke.
Yeah,
That's
exactly.
not a SID, and that's Pepsi.
Yeah, much like wine tasting, I think SID appreciation is probably 80% nonsense. But yeah, don't at me, wine nerds. I've read the studies.
I think you're right.
All right, let's see. I think I am next here, and I have maybe not found as many things as I often do, but so here's a random list of things. One thing that I was surprised to see, just because I hadn't seen it before, was a map pack by Penguin for the Apple. So it's basically like sort of map clip art. It comes with all the states, and you can use it in your whatever Apple program you wanted to create. So this never came across my field of vision in the days when it was actually sold, and I was just surprised to find another sort of Penguin title that I hadn't seen before. So
I wonder what format the artwork would be in for this, because like graphic formats weren't very standard at this time. So unless it was specific to like Print Shop or Newsroom or Geos or something like that, like what format are these in? Is this Graphics Magician, these things?
I think I think you can use them in Complete Graphic System is the like Penguin product that would do this.
Okay, so it's a clip art pack for that software.
I believe that is correct. Yeah.
Okay.
So, anyway, I'm not probably going to seek this out too much, but it's interesting that it existed. So you can all 50 states in the U.S., Canadian provinces and continents filled in and outlined. So
it's just nice to be mentioned.
Yeah,
sure.
That's right.
Never saw this one before.
Somewhere there is a relatively funny, brief Onion article about like Perky Canada has own, whatever customs laws.
Yeah, exactly.
Okay, let's see. What was the next thing? Oh yeah, I'm not sure that I would necessarily recommend this, but this is the Lode Runner board game.
Oh my. Yes, we played this at Kansas Fest one year, and it is not good. But it is fascinating that it exists, but as a game, it is not good.
I feel like I remember it being discussed. It was not an entertaining game, right? Or it was not really a fun game. Okay.
No, not at all.
Yeah. But it's rare. So if you want to, you can buy it for $417. But yeah.
It did have one neat element, which is that your character pieces, so you could carry the gold around, and the little gold containers were like little plastic. They looked like oil drums in the version that we had, and they would actually sit on your character. So when you were carrying them around, it was actually like, so it's a production level that would be considered common in modern board games, but at this time, board game production values were much lower. So it was very much just like you would have expected, just paper chits for everything, but they had actual little plastic elements that connected together to form your character. So that was kind of neat. But that's the only, I would say, interesting property about this, aside from being branded Lode Runner.
Yeah. Part of what made me go and look for this was that if you are a super fan of the game, you can get a fridge magnet of the box cover. I don't know why someone decided that this was a good idea.
Wow, so it's a promotional magnet of the cover of the board game of the video game.
Yeah, exactly.
All right. I look forward to the movie adaptation of this magnet.
That's right. How does it work? But yeah. Anyway, I don't think this is a vintage item. I think this is a modern magnet.
Oh, okay.
But
all right. Oh, yeah, that's the okay. Yeah.
Also comes with a 20-page stapled together prologue primer.
Hopefully, yeah.
It's an AI magnet. Yeah.
There we go. Yeah. Anyway, this is the I put up the Onion article.
This one city marked on their map that says Canada City.
Yeah.
Oh, that's so good.
From 1996. This was it.
Wow.
So it's a time when I was paying attention to the Onion.
Yeah. It's still funny though today, actually. So that's the Onion for you. The comedy holds up.
If you wanted to get the 1975 MITS Altair Users Group Computer Notes Magazine, Volume 1, Issue 1, that says Altair Basic up and running, you can get that for $500 on eBay. But anyway, it seems like it connected well with the discussion from what seems like a million years ago of the Altair 8080 or 8800. I mean,
It's sort of funny that the earliest computer documentation is the most expensive, as you would sort of expect, but the earliest computer documentation was also the worst produced, because at the time, these were very small companies or single hobbyists who didn't have access to printing presses and things. So everything is like badly photocopied stuff they wrote on their typewriter or did manual paste up on their kitchen table. So now it's just the worst produced material, but now it's worth the most money.
Yeah. Yeah. Quite something.
Yeah.
Let's see. I guess this was also I picked the a reproduction of the U.S. patent, or at least some of the illustrations of the patent for the Apple IIc. So you can sort of see what they thought it was going to look like.
I didn't know even back then Apple was just patenting everything they did just in case.
Yeah.
I don't think I realized they had patented the Apple IIc.
Oh,
that's funny.
You have Blake has a.
Oh, he's got a copy of it.
The physical. Yeah.
Yeah.
Right.
Oh, that's neat. Yeah. The actual patent, according to what it said there, is for the housing. The personal computer housing is what they patented. So the plastic shell, basically, is what they're claiming to have patented here.
Excellent.
Yes.
That's pretty funny.
Very nice.
Oh, Apple.
It's nice that you had. It's nice that Blake had this patent stuff right on hand.
Yes.
Just off camera.
Yeah, exactly.
I did. I acquired this on eBay some time ago. I had no memory whatsoever of it, but in the cleaning of my moist basement room, I came across a manila folder with this in it, and I thought, oh, I must have somehow purchased this and put it on the shelf just 2 days ago. So it was waiting for me. It's almost providence that prepared me for this recording.
Excellent. Also, I would point out that it listed it as first inventor here is Rob Jamel.
So there you go. Look at that.
Who will be coming to talk or virtually at Kansas Fest. So
very cool.
Should ask him if he ever got any royalties for this patent.
Just to get the tensions high.
Yeah.
Get him fired up.
So did anyone ever license that patent from you for the Apple IIc case? Anyone ever try to make a PC that looked exactly like this?
Yeah, I wonder. One of the things that it would be kind of neat is to have some of these people who used to work together interact. Now. So we will have Rob Jamel, beaming in. When when our in-person speaker is there, and I'm hoping that they didn't just like hate each other.
you never know, I
bought
guess.
That food in the fridge.
Yeah. Yes. Yeah. Turns out one of them was the guy that ate the other one's lunch every day.
Right. Okay, now I guess this is the last thing I was going to put up. So I don't have much to say about this exactly, but this is a NetPliance eye opener. In its box. This is, I think, maybe a slightly later. I don't know. It's called an Eye Opener 2001, so it might be a slightly later version of the Eye Opener NetPliance. But so we had in our sort of like whatever private chat, we had been talking a little bit about these devices, and you can still get them. And it's kind of like a dedicated internet appliance, as NetPliance might suggest. So you can browse the web and check your email. In the kitchen without having to use a command line or know anything about computers, I guess. I think it was also a subscription thing too. So I saw some reference to that somewhere. So you subscribed to their service so that you could get your email through it. I guess it's maybe like like as if there were like an AOL terminal.
I actually had one of these. And hacked it. Like it was interestingly, the story was that they sold it for like $99, and it had a WinChip CPU in it. It was a decent little PC, but it had QNX operating system or something on it, and you would dial into their service and use it. They didn't have a binding contract initially. So you could buy it and never sign up and pay the monthly fee of like $25 a month or something. That was the case for about a month, and it got out, and everyone went jumped on it, and I grabbed one, and so I got the unit. I installed Windows on it. I think it was Windows 98 or something like that, and did a number of hardware upgrades to it. I think I had it as a little temporary desktop computer while I was between Macs. I was selling one of my Power Macs for another, and I used it as my main machine for like 2 months, and did a number of upgrades. Like you had the ability to put in a hard drive, which it didn't have. You could upgrade the CPU, add a serial. People started like weeks after it was released, someone sold a breakout serial board specifically for this unit, so you could give it serial ports. And so it was a great little computer. And then after about a month, they learned their mistake, and they started they made the contract binding. You're purchasing it. You then agreed to pay this for like 2 years. The hard disk interface, they pulled the pins off and covered it with a massive block of glue, so that no one, if you opened it up and tried to go in, they put a number of glue blocks to prevent you from physically, adjusting it. And one day I was driving to work, and I got a phone call from Eye Opener Company, and they said, we need to talk to you because we noticed you haven't registered your eye opener. I was like, oh yes, I don't intend to do that. That's not part of the agreement, terms of service. And she's like, oh, it is. And I said, no. I said, I've been following it closely. I said, I've got Windows installed. I upgraded the CPU, the RAM. It's a nice little machine. This is driving in the morning to work on the cell phone. And she says, she's with and she says, well, we've retroactively changed our terms of agreement. And she said, so it is actually required for you to pay it, or you'll have to pay this amount. I was like, that's interesting. I said, I can discuss it with my wife, who is an attorney. I believe that retroactively changing the terms of service after a purchase is not something that's going to fly very well. But
yeah, good luck with that one in court. Yeah.
Yeah. So she actually called me back later in the day and said, so what have you done with your IO? I said, oh, well, I stripped the case off and I've mounted it in a frame, which I hadn't. I wanted to indicate I defaced it. She said, all right, just keep it. Don't worry about it. I was never worried.
Yeah. I'm not the one who was worried.
So they were literally calling around. Like they were calling everyone that they entered their phone number, I guess, to order, trying to get them to sign this terms of service, which, I feel bad for them, but it seems like their lawyers, how do you send something dependent on, the profit from, it's a loss. They sold it at a loss, obviously, and then don't make it binding. So, it was for about 2 months. It was a huge party. Though all of us that got it were having. There was like dedicated forums, and I got a sticker on it that says "I opened." Like it's sitting on the sticker. I bought it custom. It was a great time. But So anyway, I'm sorry to override your item, but I did have some history there to share. That was a fun time. I'll have to say I did enjoy it fully. That, and then finally I sold the expanded thing on eBay when I was done with it. So, but
that's that is a fascinating little supernova subculture that appeared and then vanished in the space of like 30 days around this machine. That's actually pretty interesting. I had no idea about any of that.
Yeah, I remember like buying the I opened sticker. There were some other that were far more in your face and visceral. It was just people were pissed, and they were ready to, so I remember some guy had a long heat sink sticking out the back of the unit. He had put some incredibly powered CPU, and some guy was like, it was his, like he had a server farm of these things or something. It was nuts. Boy, what a time to be alive that was.
How desperate they must have been, though, to try and call people and hope they could bully them into sending money, as though they could retroactively change the terms of a signed contract. Like that is like no lawyer would not laugh you out of the room on that one.
Right. But I guess
they were just hoping people didn't. They were hoping people didn't know any better. I'm sure it would just be like, oh, okay, and send them money.
They must have seen that they clearly were absolutely going to go under, and
it must have been an existential situation for the company, or they wouldn't have tried that, I'm sure.
I mean, we shouldn't have been able to, it was their mistake. We shouldn't have been able to do it. It was fun, but I guess I do kind of feel bad for them. But that call was a little annoying.
Yeah.
All right. Cool. Oh, I did actually come across, this is probably related then, the eye opener BIOS. So that's like something if yours, I think this allows you to use a hard drive, so it's probably some part of that same project.
And there was one guy that had a tattoo, like it was one of these eye opener related tattoos. On his he had a picture of it. It was newly inked. It was all red, and it was like some hardcore eye opener thing. Yeah, I don't know. That's funny. Yeah, I guess they changed. Obviously, they would have changed the ROM, right? So, yeah.
All right. Okay, I think we made it through the eBay items. So I guess we can maybe turn to closing discussions and any notes you may have. Blake, you are first.
All right. I guess I'm just going to continue. Setting up the computer room. Everything is. At one point, there was this crowded room, which people have seen pictures and have watched me sit in during the podcast. It was completely empty. Nothing was there. And so I'm slowly putting things back. I've made some decisions, put some additional units on the shelf. I'm not using I don't really use the TRS-80 Model 4 daily. So I gave up some desk space for that and kind of put it in more of a display thing. Anyway, so I made some different choices. I'm setting it back up, and that'll probably go for another week or so before I'm fully back. And our dining room is thankfully fully without stacks of vintage computing hardware, literature, and such. Yes, my wife and daughter have not enjoyed the intrusion into the main area of the house with all of my dusty things that smell old, as my daughter indicates.
Are you sure she wasn't talking about you?
No, that's a separate old smell, and apparently I do smell old, but this is a different, dustier smell. I'm not as dusty. I do tend to keep myself rather dusted off, but yeah. So anyway, that's I continue to strive to do that. And again, everyone, please change your sump pump about every 5 to 6 years.
Yes.
I recommend.
Full circle.
Only costs about $250, $300, but it's worth avoiding a very, very unpleasant life experience. So
Excellent. Let's see. For closing notes for me, I don't really have much to say. I mean, I guess it's just work's been very busy. And for people who are somehow managing to follow along in real time, the episodes that you can hear on the feed are way behind the episodes that we are recording. Someday soon that will hopefully change. But so yeah, whenever I have free time, I tend to edit rather than like play around with old computers. But that too, I hope will change. So Quinn, any closing notes for you?
So I've been extremely busy with a new retro project, but I'm not able to talk about it yet. So we've talked about it here on the show in the Discord, but I'm pretty close to being able to announce it actually, because progress has been good. But yeah, I've been working really hard on something that I think is really cool. Maybe next time we record, I'll have that announced. Yeah, so I basically got one more bug to fix in this thing that I'm doing. So assuming I get that done in the next however many weeks it is till we record again, maybe I'll be able to announce it next time. But I'm so close. It's very exciting. So
excellent. Yeah.
Stay tuned.
Very cool. Very cool.
Cliffhanger.
Yeah, I feel like if I kind of want to come up with a good project just because the Kansas Fest submission deadline is coming up, and I feel like I want to submit something.
Yeah, actually, yeah. Maybe I should submit a talk about this thing I'm doing. I haven't done a K-Fest talk in a long time. Might be due for one.
All right. So I guess that is it for this show. You can find the show notes for this and all the RCR shows at rcrpodcast.com. You can find lo-fi episodes and more at Gopher, also at rcrpodcast.com. You can discuss the forums. You can discuss the show in the forums at forum.vcfed.org/something. You can follow RCR on Mastodon. We are at RCR Podcast at podcasts.social. You can join the Facebook group at facebook.com/groups/RCR Podcast. And I meant to ask Michael, actually, if he's taking care of the Facebook group. I think he is. but his electricity went out. But there is activity there. And I think, if you aren't let in, then get a hold of us in some other way, and we'll find someone to moderate that group. But you can send feedback to feedback@rcrpodcast.com. We are members of the Throwback Network at throwbackreviews.com, and please write a review on iTunes, which we are now back on, if you want. And until next time,
Retrocompute.
Okay. What we need is like 3, 2, 1, go.
Yeah.
Or something. But
I was way early.
yeah. All right.
Problem is
excellent.
everyone keeps waiting longer and longer, so
Yeah.
everyone's waiting for someone else to start.
Yep. Okay, good. So thanks everyone for doing that. We managed, I think, to keep it under 2 hours somehow.
Yeah, that was pretty tight actually for us. Yeah.
Yep. And thanks
Good
YouTube
length.
for following along and helping us out.
Yeah. Bye, YouTube.
Yep. Bye.
See you, folks.